I think when you are a parent of a child with special needs or who's medically complex, like, you don't necessarily have a choice. Your identity changes. And maybe you want it to change, or maybe you're resistant to change. But me personally, I'm not by nature a person who wants to be adversarial or confront conflict.
Planning for a loved one with special needs takes clarity and the right strategy. Remarkable Futures brings practical conversations and expert insight to help families protect benefits, build stability, and move forward with confidence.
Hi, welcome to the Remarkable Futures podcast, where we are creating content to help special needs families navigate the issues that present themselves in everyday life for them. I am really excited today to have Rachel Jasiczek with me. Rachel has a doctorate in rhetoric?
In composition.
In composition?
Yes.
So I have to admit, I have an undergrad in communications. It sounds like you have my degree, but on steroids. So does anyone win an argument with you if you have that?
My husband would say he does,
He does,
at times,
okay.
but, debatable.
Well, what brought us together is I was genuinely moved by a piece that you wrote for the Connecticut Mirror. And we're going to put a link to that below the description on the podcast once it's posted to YouTube. But I found it quite moving. And I don't want to repeat what's in there. I want you to kind of share a little more in depth of the story. Can you tell me about Lorelei and how things have evolved with her? Mm-hmm. She sounds amazing.
She is. She's the best kid. She's so much fun. She's 5 years old and she just started kindergarten this year. She loves riding the bus each day. That is a big highlight. She's a very adventurous child and in constant motion, which sometimes is a challenge, but also leads us to a lot of fun adventure. So she's always wanting to try something new. Every day is an experience for her. Even, simple things like going to the grocery store is very fun for her, getting to ride in the cart. So she's a kid who finds joy in everything she does, which helps us find joy in really simple things, But she has SYNGAP1 related disorders, which is a developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, which is more than a neurodevelopmental disorder. Most of the patients have intellectual disability. They have epilepsy. Most have an autism diagnosis, as well as a lot of other medical challenges. But despite that, this is a kid who just loves everything and loves to give hugs and be around other people and just, make the best of every situation.
And that's a rare disease.
Ultra rare.
Ultra rare,
which means there are fewer than 2,000 people worldwide diagnosed with this. In fact, there are 1,707 that we know of right now, but it's definitely underdiagnosed.
And so when you say it's underdiagnosed, are there other misdiagnoses, as I assume? Does it mask as autism, or does it mask as in other ways?
Well, the only way to be diagnosed is through genetic testing. So that's the only way you will know if your child or your loved one has SYNGAP1 related disorders. My daughter happened to get an autism diagnosis first, which then led us to genetic testing. Other families see seizure activity very early on. Lorelei's seizures didn't start until around the age 5. So sometimes it's epilepsy, which will lead to genetic testing.
It's interesting with rare diseases. It seems like the vocalness of the lobbying has a direct outcome in support. And I may be making a generalization of this, and I'll share a little bit of my personal background with it. My father had ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, more commonly referred to as that. one of the things that frankly helps people with ALS in terms of applying for Social Security disability related to a lot of the lobbying that the ALS Association did to get that diagnosis just turned into an automatic approval. The other thing that I think helped with it, frankly, is that there's a cluster or a concentration of diagnosed people that were veterans. And my father was a veteran as well. And with Synapse, you're involved with Cure Synap 1, right?
Cure SYNGAP 1.
SYNGAP 1, okay.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about how that happened.
Right. So Cure SYNGAP 1 is a nonprofit that is patient-led, but really parent-led, caregiver-led. They're an organization that's bringing together scientists, industry partners, families, clinicians, to try to help find a cure for SYNGAP 1. There is no treatment right now for the underlying cause, which is a protein deficiency that our children have. But this group is global now. However, it started with a family who got a diagnosis and there was no one else out there, or just a couple of people. I mean, scientists and, doctors, we're often educating doctors on what SYNGAP 1 related disorders is. So it was a family that started, and they said, we have to do something. No one's going to work for this unless we push them and we drive this cause. So it started with some very tired, confused, anxious parents who have now led us so far. And that just, Cure SYNGAP 1 started in 2019. So it's not that old of an organization. But we are looking at a clinical trial starting later, our first clinical trial starting later this year, which is really exciting. And parents did that.
And so the clinical trial is, there's a drug obviously that's being developed?
Yes, a treatment that will hopefully increase the SYNGAP protein expression in the deficient gene that our children and our loved ones have. So we all have two genes that produce SYNGAP1 related, or SYNGAP protein. Our children produce about half that amount needed. It affects cognition, it affects memory, learning, behaviors, language. Most children with SYNGAP1 are nonverbal for most of their lives, or low verbal. So the treatment, there's still a lot we don't know. We're waiting for details about where the clinical trial will happen. But yes, it will be the first treatment. So we'll see how that goes to help increase that protein production. We don't think that the first treatment is going to lead to a cure. We still need more scientists working on this and looking into this and trying other therapies as well. But there's a lot of hope right there.
It's interesting. There's so much going on with development of different medicines that, for example, in my day job and helping people manage money, there have been a couple of companies that we have followed that are close to releasing drugs for muscular dystrophy. And there's some remarkable treatments on the way. So it's great that there's some hope there.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to why it's so important for doctors to recommend genetic testing too. Because when we received Lorelei's diagnosis of autism, we thought, okay, this explains things. And our doctor said, well, you should do genetic testing. And honestly, in that moment, receiving that diagnosis was very overwhelming. In that moment, I was asked to sign papers to agree to genetic testing, and very unlike myself, I signed something before even reading it closely. Not me at all. But all it meant was some tests were going to come in the mail for us to do some swabs and send it back. So we could have decided later not to. But if we hadn't done that genetic testing, we would not know that Lorelei has SRD. And now that we know, we're a part of an amazing community and looking at a clinical trial. So I think it's really important for families to push for that for any kind of rare disease, because you just never know.
So as I mentioned, the Connecticut Mirror piece was just an amazing piece to
you.
read. And I'm a little bit on the other end of things where my son with autism is older. So a lot of the previous podcasts that we've had have kind of been reflecting that in terms of the process that we went through, the battles we had to face. And the thing that I find remarkable in your situation is that your daughter is young and you've taken a step that frankly I've thought about taking but haven't taken in terms of becoming more of an advocate and almost I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but a political animal as well, having to navigate dealing with state representatives in the lobbying process. What prompted you to write that piece? And is there more to come, or am I going to see you in the New York Times soon?
Maybe. Aim high, right? Well, you're right. Lorelai is 5. And in fact, we've only known about her SYNGAP1 related disorder diagnosis for almost 2 years now. So we have plenty of battles ahead of us. We've overcome many battles that we know we'll probably have. We're not there yet. But I think what made me write the piece for the Connecticut Mirror was that it came from a place of love, a place of extreme frustration and fear about the future. I think I was finding myself in a place very consumed with the worry of what will the future be like for my daughter. And I was just listening to other people's stories, even on social media, just families saying, this has happened to us, and we're going through this, and we're doing this. And I just thought, that's going to probably be us in 10 years or 15 years. So I felt that I needed to take all that anxiety, all that worry, and put it into something that felt productive for me. And yes, I'm a professor of English. Writing is what I do, and I teach my students every day that your literacy is your superpower. You've got to use it to help others. And so I felt I could help my own daughter. I could help others, though, make Connecticut the home that they really deserve to have. So I wanted to highlight the issues we're all aware of, but kind of bring it together and call on the state to help us, because we're all humans, and I believe in the good of people. I believe that we want to help others, and so when we have the capacity to do that, we have to do that.
How has advocacy changed you personally? Your inner confidence, your voice, your sense of purpose?
Yeah, it has changed me in a way that I think when you are a parent of a child with special needs or who's medically complex, like, you don't necessarily have a choice. Your identity changes, and maybe you want it to change, or maybe you're resistant to change. But me personally, I'm not by nature a person who wants to be adversarial or confront conflict. I like to help, make people happy, right? But I have definitely learned that I can't worry about that. My daughter's needs are a top priority, and I can advocate for her needs and still be respectful, but that I have to do it. I have to do it myself. Not doing it feels like a form of complicity for me. Like, I just have to. So it's changed me into someone who will say, I'm showing up. I don't know anything, but I need to be involved. So tell me how I can be involved. What can I do? So I look for those opportunities now, which I probably would not have done before.
I often think of, I put on my inner economist hat. And if you think of the prevalency of dementia diagnosis, and you think of the prevalency increasing, of course, with autism diagnosis, and those population sets are creating demands on society from an economic standpoint. I think of Alzheimer's and the the ever-increasing prevalency of Alzheimer's as well as other types of dementia. Right. And if you map those two out in terms of the baby boomers that potentially are going to have an issue with Alzheimer's or dementia, and then you map out the explosion of the population of individuals with autism, and you do the math of the cost to society down the road, it's frightening.
Right.
And it's also frightening from a standpoint now where, as a parent of a special needs child, I think of, well, they should make an investment in special needs kids while they're younger, so hopefully they have less, they'll put less of a demand on systems later in society. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times they're just focused on the day and today and what the budget constraints are now. Right. And can you tell me a little bit of how that has come into, or those realities of the economics have come into conversations as you've lobbied with different groups and had these kind of discussions?
Right. And as I stated, my journey with advocacy is still pretty young. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right that there are so many systems nationally, but if we're talking about Connecticut, there are a lot of systems that are working in silos at this point. There are a lot of programs with very strict eligibility requirements, and systems that are programs that are more short term than long term. So you're right that investing now is just logical. Yeah. I'm a word person. I'm not a numbers person, but you don't have to be a numbers person to understand that addressing issues now saves money later, right? So in my work, I guess with SYNGAP or Cure SYNGAP 1, as a grant writer, we're asking people to invest in our kids, people who don't know our kids, for science, right? Science will lead us to more discoveries and we'll be able to help other people too. So investing in something like SYNGAP 1 right now, a neurodevelopmental order with epilepsy, well, there are a lot of people affected by epilepsy. So a discovery now will ultimately lead to more effective, cost-effective treatments later as well. As far as politics goes or legislation, I think one step to helping people understand is sharing your stories, letting them know your kids and know the joys of your children as well as the struggles and how so much is placed on the family to figure out. But I think it makes sense that if you can support our families now versus later, you help parents also be more productive members of society. We're professors, we're doctors, we're sanitation workers. We can do more for our communities too when you invest in programs for our children now. And I think also looking at things like, this is something I'm interested in and learning more. I met with the executive director of the Connecticut Council for Developmental Disabilities just the other day. He actually reached out to me also after the Connecticut Mirror piece, and I said, I just want to learn what you do. And he enlightened me about how prison systems can even be overburdened later in a person's life when services are not provided at a younger age too. There might be people who have found themselves in trouble and therefore landed themselves in prison because of possibly an intellectual disability or something else, right? So all of these systems are affected by what is happening today in the services that we can provide for our children today. Not to imply that everyone with a developmental disability will end up in prison, right? But we know that there could be supports that could help prevent people from ending up in worse situations in life.
Well, I think of my own educational development, and I was hyperactive. I was on Ritalin in the 70s, and I remember watching the evening news one night with my wife, and I must have been like 30 at the time, and there was a study about individuals with ADD and just the way the news report sounded, I was surprised after listening to it that I wasn't in prison because it implied that the the problems were such that it led to that outcome quite a bit. When you think of your journey, what has surprised you on a local level, on a state level, on a federal level, of how individuals like your daughter are being treated and their outcomes?
I want to say I'm surprised, but not surprised that the people who interact with Lorelai on a daily basis they're wonderful people, and they really care about my daughter. Her teachers, her therapists, the specialists we see, but so much is out of their control. I'm thinking about school because for the most part we've had a lot of, we're in kindergarten now, I'm spending hours in PPT meetings with her team, and I know there are a lot of decisions being made that are not at the local level of our district, but I'm seeing the effects of things that my daughter needs but maybe can't get yet, and that has to do with money, politics, locally and nationally. So right now, I feel like that's where I'm seeing the biggest impact for my daughter and just her age group and hearing stories of other families. But in the SYNGAP community, parents talk about changes to Medicaid and how that's affecting their ability to get care for their adult children in their homes versus an institution, which no one wants to have to send their, child there, or how they care long-term, plan for long-term care for their adult children as well. So I'm learning more about that, absolutely, but on a day-to-day, people care about your kids, but a lot is out of their control as well.
And I guess that kind of touches on the personalization that do you, in talking or in the lobbying efforts that you've been involved with, in the conversations that you have, one of the things that I have found in those conversations in the past is people generalize. And, recently there was and I try not to be political, but there was a national political figure that said kids with autism can't play baseball. And that broke my heart because my son loves baseball.
He can play baseball.
And he plays buddy baseball. And it just was, again, a generalization. And it sounds like SYNGAP is a spectrum as well. It's not simply,
right.
You meet one kid with SYNGAP and you've met them all. It's It's a spectrum.
It is a spectrum. And I have to say, Lorelai loves gymnastics. We go to gymnastics every Sunday, so she can do gymnastics, she can play baseball, she can do what any other kid wants to do. It might just look a little bit differently, right? So it's unfortunate that people make comments that they can't do or that they have some kind of limitation because of, their disability. But SYNGAP is a spectrum. Our daughter Lorelai is more mildly affected than some of the other families with kids that we know. Some children with SYNGAP have feeding tubes. They have constant epileptic activity, even eating triggers, seizures. Some have mobility issues. Lorelai is a very active child. She is low verbal, but more verbal than many of the other patients that we've met. She has hypotonia, some low muscle tone. She has dyspraxia, coordination issues. But what I would say is that while as parents, my husband Mikey and I think we've accepted we'll never have another good night of sleep, right? We'll never fully feel rested, but at the same time, we have more capacity to advocate and to push for change than some other families do. And so in this moment, we have the ability, and so we do that, even though our child might not be as affected. But we want to help the larger community, and that's really important.
That's terrific. We're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be back.
Support for Remarkable Futures comes from Able Planning. helping families navigate the financial future of loved ones with special needs through personalized planning, guidance, and long-term strategies. Learn more at ableplanning.com.
Welcome back. Again, I'm excited to have Rachel Jasiczek with me. And am I doing okay with that pronunciation? Close?
Jasiczek.
Jasiczek. Okay. Again, thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit about how perhaps your daughter is helpful in advocacy, in that when someone meets her, I would imagine that makes it real for them?
Lorelai has a way of just drawing people into her circle. She is a super sweet child. For the most part, she's always smiling. And so when people meet her, I do think they gravitate towards her because she's excited to meet them. I think when thinking about advocacy and getting people who have no knowledge of rare disease or autism, genetic conditions, it's really important to be very specific about your child's story or your family's story. You know, share with them how many hours a week are you spending in the car taking your kid to get services or therapies that they need, because it's not available locally. I think sharing the wonderful things about your children is really important because you want people to see them as humans, as part of our community, and that they bring value to our community. But you also want to share the struggles too. It takes time to be comfortable sharing those struggles. After Lorelai's diagnosis, my husband and I mean, we didn't really say much to anybody. It even took us a while to tell our families. We weren't sure we wanted to go public. We wanted to protect Lorelai's privacy, but at the same time, we finally realized, well, we have to be part of the narrative. We have to help share that with others. And so highlighting all the wonderful things we get to do, but also the daily struggles is very important, I think.
So who should parents try to connect with if they want to be advocates? Are they advocating to state legislators? Are they advocating to the local mayor? Are they advocating to politicians in Washington? How do you even start, and who do you start talking to?
I mean, if this was a multiple choice test, I'd say all of the above. Think about what your child and your family needs. What need is not being met, and then go from there. With Lorelai, you know, we're kind of part of multiple communities. We're part of the autism community, but we're also part of the rare disease community, and then more specifically, we're part of the Cure SANGAP 1 community. So figure out where that community is, or if that community doesn't exist, you might have to start it yourself, but you could reach out to other communities that had to start somewhere. Thinking about rare disease in particular, I said, okay, what national organizations exist? I just went to Google and I said, rare disease Connecticut, rare disease New England, rare disease nationally, and organizations came up. Every Life, Rare New England, NORD. You go to those websites and you'll find links that say, want to get involved or want to join a webinar? Do that. Even if you don't have the time right now, get the emails, get on the listservs, right? More locally, reach out to your local representative. It could be your mayor, it could be your district representative, your state legislator. And if you contact them and they say, well, this is not my area, they'll get you in touch with who you can talk to or who might be able to help. So I think you have to push yourself, or at least I had to push myself to say, I have to do this. I don't have answers, but I want to talk to somebody. I think you feel maybe when you start advocacy that you're not an expert enough, but you have lived experience. Even if your diagnosis is very new, you have lived experience that is incredibly valuable. So use that and say, this is happening. This is what we see. Who could help me with this? I think people want to help. They just don't know that you need help until you reach out. So really anyone and everyone, but starting with local listservs and seeing if there's a nonprofit that exists or a representative, elected representative is a great place to start.
And what rights or expectations should families have as citizens that in terms of when seeking support?
Yeah. Well, as parents, we know that our children have every right as any other human being to access basic services, to access an education. Although I think that's true, systemic injustices exist. And a lot of times it comes down to a number on a budget. So just know your child is entitled to the same thing any other person is entitled to. But of course, if you want to look into it more, there's the IDEA, that'll educate you on what your rights are in education. There's the American with Disabilities Act. I definitely am not an expert in all of that yet, although I'm currently enrolled in my Master's of Science in Special Education program as a way to support Lorelai, and I'm very much looking forward to education law course that's coming up soon. But there are a lot of free resources online as well.
So what approaches have you found most effective in encouraging progress or change when you're talking with people? Is it you try to come at it optimistically, or do you give them sometimes a glimpse of the stark realities, or is it a combination?
A combination, but really through sharing your story, being willing, getting to connect with others is so important. I think, again, we have limited experience. As we said before, your family has faced many more hurdles than my husband and I and Lorelai have, but always being respectful. And I think assuming that people do want to do good is important. You just might have to show them how to do good, have to direct them quite a bit at times. So I think sharing your story is incredibly important, remaining respectful, trying to see it from the other side's perspective, even if they're not trying to see your perspective, and finding common ground in everything that we do is incredibly helpful.
And do you have, it sounds like you're optimistic about the clinical trial.
Yes.
Are there other things that you're optimistic about? I'm sure you have optimism for your daughter, but tell me about what you're feeling good about for the future.
Right, absolutely, the clinical trial. Just the fact that scientists are interested and want to explore this completely random mutation that happens. It's not inherited, it's completely random. But it could happen to any child. I'm very optimistic though when I see other children play with my daughter, that we are raising a generation of people who are more inclusive. She is in her self-contained classroom part of the day, and she's in the gen ed classroom part of the day too. And hearing how other children help her and include her and want to play with her gives me a lot of optimism. But then I also, in Connecticut, think we are seeing change happen. People are pushing for that. Just the other day, I submitted a written testimony about a House bill on changing the eligibility requirements for DDS, Department of Developmental Services, and that the IQ requirement is too restrictive. It does exclude people, and a lot of our different waiver programs exclude people, and then they're left with nothing because they don't fit perfectly into any particular category. And people realize that. And I see people who aren't necessarily affected by intellectual disability or autism also caring about that too. They're getting to know our families, and so they say, oh, well, I have a friend down the street or in my neighborhood whose daughter has these challenges, and so they're caring too. So I do see, although change is very slow, I see it happening, and I see the power in people coming together to push for that change.
And it seems like that you look at when a child is evaluated, whether it be for different support levels or even in the development of their IEPs, there's this tendency to try to lead it to a number, a score, a land score, etc. And that score doesn't tell the story.
No.
It maybe reflects some level of abilities, but it doesn't tell the story.
I would say as an educator, I have known that my entire career. I mean, a test score means honestly not that much because there's so many factors that go into that day and that evaluation. And yeah, IQ is a number. My daughter excels in certain things that other kids don't excel in, but she also has, I hate to say deficits, right? But that's sort of how it's discussed, deficits. But even someone with a number higher than the IQ cutoff might really struggle with daily functioning, might really struggle with social issues or behavioral issues or some other issue. So the score just does not reflect the life that's being lived and how someone can be in the community. So I think it's really important that we really look at what other states are doing too. I mean, Connecticut is a leader in many ways, but we are one of the states that has the strict IQ requirement where other states have sort of made that more inclusive, that eligibility requirement more inclusive.
So if I'm where you were, and your daughter's 5 now?
Yeah.
So, and how old was she when you got the diagnosis?
She was almost 3.5 when we received the autism diagnosis. And then moving into 4 years old when we received the SYNGAP1 diagnosis.
So if you could go back in time, and I asked this in different ways in various different podcasts, and I tend to laugh a little bit about it internally because my son always loves to romanticize what he just left and has frequently said that he wants to build a time machine. But if you had a time machine and you could go back and talk to yourself at that point where you're learning the full diagnosis of you, if you will, and maybe not so much of advice on, your general family life, but what would you say to your younger self? And it wasn't that long ago, so, but what would you say to yourself at that point in terms of advocacy? What would you have, like 3 things that you might say, hey, you should do this, this, and this?
Actually, I want to talk a little bit about Lorelei's diagnosis story then, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We didn't really notice anything that concerned us until around 2 years old or so. I mean, she, for the most part, was meeting milestones, maybe on the slightly later end. So walking was maybe more around 14 months or so versus 12 months. And her language was on the lower end when she was around 18 months. But she'd had chronic ear infections. And that was a struggle. And so we kept going to our doctor and saying, well, her language is delayed. And, the doctor would say, well, it's the ear infections. Get ear tubes. Okay, well, we got ear tubes and cleared up the ear infections, but the language was still delayed. And at the same time, there was some head hitting that Lorelei was going through. And the doctor said, oh, it's just the constant infections. And we just said, well, something else seems not right. Now there's some repetitive behaviors. And the doctor kind of said, no, she'll grow out of it. Just give it time. And so we didn't push for any kind of evaluation. We finally got referred to speech therapy, and the speech therapist said, I don't think I can make any progress with her until she receives ABA therapy. And I said, okay, sure. Okay. I didn't know what ABA therapy was. And then I went and looked into it and I said, oh, well, that's just something for kids with autism. What? So then I went back to our doctor and said, our speech therapist says she can't really make progress with her until we get this other therapy. And so the doctor said, oh, okay, well, let me refer you to this neurodevelopmental doctor. And that's where we went. So I think even though Lorelei was our first child and we had no child to compare her to, and you obviously hear don't compare your child to other children. I think we could have trusted our gut a little bit more and pushed for what we felt like we needed answers sooner, that it couldn't all just be as a result of these ear infections. So I would tell parents, trust your gut. You have to advocate even with your doctors. Even when you think they know more than you, they don't always, right? Another thing I would say to myself is take a breath. I like to know everything about everything before I take any action. And that's sort of the teacher in me, sort of the researcher in me. I had to build my confidence a bit and say, you don't have to know actually anything to start helping, to start joining a cause or whatnot. Just go and show up, and that's great. And someone will guide you, you'll figure it out as you go. And I think another piece of advice I would give myself is just enjoy every good moment. It's impossible not to worry about your child's future, but you don't want to be worrying so much that you can't enjoy getting on the floor in the afternoon after school and playing with school buses and with your child, or magnet tiles or whatever it is. So those moments are really important to soak in. Lorelai is obsessed with the moon right now, loves the moon. So even in the middle of winter, after dinner, we are putting on our clothes, bundling up. We're going out on our little moon walks and searching for the moon. And that's a chance, just take those opportunities, because that's the chance to just enjoy the moment with your child and kind of let the worry melt away temporarily, because it'll always be there. But take those moments and just enjoy them as much as you can. I think a couple of additional things I would share is that we talk about family becoming advocates, but you don't have to personally be affected by any type of disability to be an advocate. In fact, at Kirsten Gap 1, we have grandparents involved. We have aunts and uncles involved. We have neighbors involved who are able to kind of bring the energy to our group along with the parents that really pushes for change. And so, whether you can be an ally or an advocate, finding ways to share our stories, finding ways to donate if you can donate is obviously incredibly important. So I would, say anybody can be an advocate. It doesn't have to be placed all on the families, because we are juggling a lot all the time. The PPT meetings, the therapies, the hectic schedules, I remember getting up I get up at 4:30 every day. My husband does as well, so that we can get ourselves ready, so that we can then get our daughter ready, because rushing her is, never results in any good outcome.
Some friction there.
But you can help be an advocate as well, because ultimately helping to push for care for our families helps the larger community. Another thing I want to mention to families who's kind of looking for a place to start. I recently learned this, that you can go to our General Assembly website and you can sign up to get notifications about different bills that are coming through. You can kind of tag it with whatever, if you want to know about Medicaid, if you want to know about education bills, if you want to know about changes happening with DDS, you can get those notifications right to your email inbox. You don't have to go searching the website all the time. And so that's a really easy way to just get notified and help become informed. And then I mentioned I wrote testimony the other night and submitted online. It took me 15 minutes. Yes, Lorelai got put to bed, we cleaned up from dinner, and I took 15 minutes to share how this would affect our family. So that's a really simple thing that people can do as well that can feel very empowering also.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. You actually make me think of something related to my wife's personal experience when she was a kindergarten teacher. And sending your kid off to kindergarten is a big moment for parents. and she used to have to shoo parents away from the windows of the classroom because she was on the first floor, and the parents would be staring in through the windows watching their little ones. Can you tell me about your daughter's first day of kindergarten and how that was for you?
Yes, it's funny you ask. Kindergarten did not start the way we thought it was going to start that morning in particular. As I mentioned, Lorelai loves buses, or I think I mentioned that. And ever since she was 4, every bus she's ever seen, she'll say, when I'm 5, I ride the bus. I was like, yes, when you're 5, you'll get to ride the bus. So 5 came around and kindergarten started. And at first, the bus was not going to come into our neighborhood. Our neighborhood's off a busy street. I think that's one place my advocacy also started, was that getting the bus to come to our door for my daughter's safety was a bit of a battle, but we got it worked out.
Good.
And we talked about the bus, and she was so excited. And then on the very first day, the bus did not come. The bus driver apparently did not get the message that she could come into the neighborhood. And so Lorelai was a little bummed that she couldn't get to ride the bus. But then I actually got to take her to school that day and see her walk through the door. And she turned around and smiled at me. And I knew she was going to be fine. She was so excited. And then I was so excited to see her come home that day and hear a little bit about her day. She's not able to tell us a ton. But when you see your kid get off the bus and you say, how was school? And she's just beaming, a lot of anxiety left my body at that moment, because I knew she was going to love it. And I want to make sure she keeps loving it, which is, advocating in that way is so important as well. But it's been wonderful seeing her blossom, especially socially with her peers by starting kindergarten.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough. I could probably talk to you for another hour without a problem. I'm hopeful that you won't mind if we check in with you in the future. I hope this podcast keeps going for quite some time, and it would be very interesting to catch up with you in the future to see how things are progressing, both for your daughter and for your advocacy.
Absolutely. I would love to stay in touch. And if I do publish more, yes, I think I didn't finish answering your question earlier. There are more ideas that I have that I'll be researching and writing about as well. So I'm so glad that one publication led me to your, studio here and getting to learn and listen to all your podcast episodes as well that have just really touched my heart, as I told you earlier today. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me share Lorelai's story to raise awareness for Kirsten Gap 1 and to help us just build a better community for our loved ones.
Well, again, thank you. And until next time, thank you for joining us for the Remarkable Futures podcast.
If today's conversation helped you, please like this video so more families can find it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Remarkable Futures. And if this topic connects with your story, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, because here, your story matters. We'll see you next time.